بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Dr. Khalil is going to be giving us a speech today, and he is a cardiologist. He's also the imam of the Muslim community in Monroe, which is just like y'all have a preacher, he's our imam. In fact, he is the backbone of our small Muslim community. Thank you.
I was told that this microphone works, but I haven't seen the proof yet. For the sake of the sound, please, if you could come and occupy the table that's closer to me, I think you will have a better chance of hearing my voice. Thank you for coming tonight. I would like to give you just a preview about Islam. The main purpose of this meeting and gathering is just to share with you our what we call iftar, which is fast-breaking meal. It happens to be our last night of the month of fasting, and so we would like to share that with you. And I'd like to give you a brief introduction to Islam, just to make you aware of what we actually do and what we believe and so on. At least you get a chance to hear it from Muslims. You've been hearing on Fox News and the other channels all kinds of stuff.
I laugh to avoid crying.
First of all, the word Islam, you must have heard, literally means submission. And the idea is a Muslim is the one who submits willingly to the teachings and commands of God. And so that's where the broad meaning of the word means. There is a general understanding of Islam which is shared by all the revealed religions. By revealed religions, I mean those that were inspired by God to prophets we call the Hebrew prophets, if you like, but they're not limited to that. So we have in Islam an understanding that all the messengers of God shared one message, which we call Islam. And so there is a chain of prophets that starts with the Prophet Adam and ends with the Prophet Muhammad, and includes many prophets. Some of them we know, and some of them we don't know. Some of the ones that we know include, for example, Noah, Abraham, Joseph, Jacob, Isaac, many of those you know already. And they conclude with the Prophet Muhammad. In that understanding, also Jesus is viewed as one of those messengers of God. And so we see it as Islam being a message that was revealed by God to His prophets. All of them are human beings, and they were teachers of humanity. They came to teach certain things, and that's how we view the Prophet Muhammad. And at the same, by the same caliber, we view the Prophet Jesus and Moses and all the others. They all really had one message in its broader sense, which is to worship one God and to treat each other in a humble and kind way. And of course there are a lot of details. Some of them may differ depending on the age and so on. So when you look at the details of Islam as we know it now, you will find some differences, for example, from Christianity or Judaism. But you will likely find more similarities than differences, in fact, even when it comes to the laws that govern day-to-day practices. But Islam as we know it, as we have it, when we call ourselves Muslims, of course, we mean that we are different from Christians and Jews. In that definition, Islam was taught by the Prophet Muhammad, who is the last of the prophets. Muhammad was the prophet that came right after Jesus. Between the two of them, there's about 600 years. So Muhammad was born in Arabia in the 6th century, and he came after Jesus, not before, because I was asked this question Muhammad come after Jesus or before? Of course, he came after. And he was born in Arabia. At the time, Arabia was pagan, idol worshipping mostly. And Muhammad belongs lineage-wise to the Prophet Abraham. In fact, there is a strong tradition in Islam that Abraham, who settled eventually in Jerusalem, was born, as you know, in Iraq and moved from Iraq to Egypt and then to Arabia for a short while and then settled eventually in Jerusalem. And he made several trips while living in Jerusalem to Arabia. In fact, he and his son Ishmael were the first two to build the first house of worship on earth. That's how Muslims, and that was in Mecca. In Mecca, there's still a city called Mecca now, and that's the place that the Prophet Muhammad was born in, thousands of years later. So he is a descendant of Ishmael. When Muhammad came, he was born unlettered. At age 40, he received his first revelation, which we call the Quran. And so the Quran didn't come to him as a book. It came as successive revelations over a period of 23 years, which marked his career as a prophet. So really from age 40 until his death at age 63, that's the period that the Prophet Muhammad taught Islam to his people. And these Quranic revelations came over a period of 23 years in different places, in different occasions, and at the time of his death, the Quran was concluded, essentially. And it was compiled into one book. We have it to this day as the Quran. You must have heard a lot about the Quran lately. And so the Quran is viewed by Muslims as the only lasting, preserved word of God that actually still exists in its entirety without a change. Without a change. The reason it was kept without a change is because it was written down at the time it was revealed and it was memorized. So the book is actually 600 pages, is memorized by thousands of people in every generation from the time of the Prophet until this day. And so it's still in Arabic, although there are a lot of translations. And the main message of the Quran revolves around worshiping one God, believing in the last day, the day of judgment, punishment and reward, believing in earlier prophets, and laws that govern everyday life, like peace and war and marriage and divorce and things of that sort. So what is Islam? You could view Islam as layers. If you like, there are different ways to explain it, but one way I'd like to discuss it is layers. There's an outward layer, which is what people do. So you look at somebody, they pray, they fast, they pay charity, they do pilgrimage, and you think, oh, these people are acting as Muslims. So anyone who acts as Muslim, we call him Muslim. So that's called Islam, the practices, the acts of worship. And Muslims will always tell you that we have 5 pillars of Islam. The 5 pillars basically talk about what Muslims do. And they include what we call the testimony, which is to believe or to testify there is only one creator of the universe. We call him Allah. So Allah is not an alien thing. The word Allah is Arabic, and it means, because all the words in Islam come from Arabic root, as you understand. The Quran was revealed in Arabic. And so Allah in Arabic means the God. The God. It doesn't mean the moon God, it means the God. The idea is that while people worship so many deities, there's only one that is worthy of worship, the one who created all of these realities that we live in, including ourselves, and will hold us accountable for our deeds. So that one we call the one God who is worthy of worship. And Arabic for that is Allah. Literally means the God. And so testifying that there is only one God, and also accepting the Prophet Muhammad as a messenger and a prophet of God. Not a divine person, not one that we worship, but one that we follow his example and his message. And so we view him as a teacher. But we don't worship Muhammad. We worship the one God. So there's a big difference. Also, it includes praying and fasting, which we are doing now. We fast every day of this month from dawn to sunset. It's about 14 hours, during which we don't eat or drink until sunset. And then we break the fast. And the next day we do the same. Fasting, of course, is not unique to Muslims. All religious traditions have fasting, including Christianity. But we do it a little differently. We do it a little more strictly, I think, than most people now do. And that's the way it has always been in Islam. The purpose of fasting is well known to people who fast. It's mostly about devoting time to worship. It is not that eating is bad for you, it's not. But it is that sometimes you need to take time to focus on your spirituality. And actually fasting is very helpful in that. It kind of focuses your inner soul on that. Of course, these things are hard to explain if you have never tried them. But that's what we do. Also, besides fasting, there is a charity. All these acts of worship we do, some of them come as mandatory, some of them as voluntary. So fasting, there is voluntary fasting and there is mandatory fasting. So this is what we do now, is the mandatory that is expected from every Muslim. And there is mandatory charity as well, which is everyone who has a minimum amount of wealth has to spend beyond that a percentage. It's usually 2.5% of what you own to the poor. You could find poor people and just spend it on them however you want, even if they happen to be among your relatives. Same thing for pilgrimage. Muslims do pilgrimage, which is a yearly visit to the first house of worship that was built by Abraham and it still exists in Mecca. It's called Kaaba. If you watch TV during the pilgrimage season, which comes in about 2 months, you will see sometimes they have footage of pilgrimage, how people usually go around this huge building. That's like a cube, and that's where the word Kaaba from. It's a cube-like building. There's nothing special about the cube other than it commemorates the first house of worship that was dedicated to worship the one God. So when Muslims go, they visit and they see where the prophets before Abraham, Ishmael, and Muhammad lived, and they worship. That's all they do. It takes about a week. And besides, so this is the first layer, the acts of worship. And then there is another layer, which is the belief systems. This is what Muslims actually believe in deep in their hearts. So that you may not be able to tell by looking at the person what they believe in. But you can look at what they do and you think, oh, this guy is acting as a Muslim. You don't really know what they are believing in. The beliefs center around believing in one God, essentially, believing in his messengers, not just the Prophet Muhammad, but also earlier prophets. So actually in Islam, believing in Jesus and Moses and Abraham is just as important, although only the message of the Prophet Muhammad has been kept without a change, as we know it. Believing in